right. Today, I'm thrilled to have Lena Sisco. Now, Lena was introduced to me by previous guest Greg Hartley, and Greg taught at Sears School and did a lot of interrogation. And Lena also did interrogation and did it down in Gitmo. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Now, interesting trivia fact, I actually was in Camp X-Ray a few years before you were there.
Really?
I never set foot inside the camp, but I took care of Cubans when they were actually Cuban refugees that were all over the island at the time. And Camp X-Ray is where we had the Cubans who had been exiled or sent back, murderers, rapists, whatever. They were in the United States and they got booted and got caught trying to come back in. So I just thought that was an interesting piece of trivia that it was, I can't remember, it was 95 or 96. It was so long ago. I don't remember the year, but I was there as a cook and we had to feed 100 and some odd thousand of them every day.
Yeah, we ended up using that prison and quickly found out it's not going to be conducive to this type of prison that we need. So they immediately started building Camp Delta.
Ah, okay. See, that's interesting. Now, we had other camps too. And that's why I didn't know if they tore them down in the years, but we had I think there was a Camp Mike, Camp Charlie. We had multiple camps for the normal Cubans, and they had literally tent cities. And it was quite fascinating because, you had doctors and lawyers, and just entire cross-section of society going through there. X-Ray was the only one that they had the, razor wire on the top and the chain link and all around. It wasn't quite as fun as the other places.
Yeah.
But that leads me into the first question, because you were in Gitmo and you went down there as an interrogator. And you have mentioned before that, of course, everybody says, well, wait a minute, you're a female. Hard to, really, people can tell you are. Hard to imagine, but there is a reason that people have that feeling. And I wanted to ask you, what did you think it would be like before you went down?
I didn't have any expectations because even when I went through my interrogation training, I got trained on conventional warfare. We didn't have training on how to deal with terrorists. So I knew that my training was going to change, or the setting environment in which I was going to use my training was going to be hugely different. And so I had no expectations because I didn't know what to expect.
Well, what did you think about the people? Honestly, is that not the most frightening possible enemy in the world? The one who will kill anybody indiscriminately around you, care so little about their own life that they will take planes and crash into buildings. Did you have any kind of fear?
Initially, I guess on my way there, I did have a little bit, but I knew that I was going to be in an interrogation room, which the detainees were going to be shackled, right? So just like in a normal prison system.
Sure.
And so I never worried about my safety. We had guards around all the time. When they were in my interrogation booth, we had them shackled to a deadbolt in the floor, and they were far enough away, and I had panic buttons in my room. Guards were right down the hall. I never feared for my life. Never. So
out of curiosity then, I'm going to guess they probably came off as relatively normal.
Yeah, it became, I'm sitting across from another human being. Now, that human being is, drastically different in many ways, with ideologies, with, their view against the Westerners. But when you come down to it, it's just another human.
True. And, well, we have I have friends who will refer to them as fundamentalists. And I think that's such a good term because we have fundamentalists too.
Oh, yeah.
And people who are very much into the Abrahamic religions and have strong feelings. So it sort of makes sense. And ironically, I could see where your being a lie detector would be very effective because the fundamentalist mentality would want to be truthful.
Maybe yes and no. I tell you what, I did steer away from. I avoided any type of discussion about religion or politics because I'm not going to change people. That's like the number one rule. I can't change your beliefs, nor do I want to. Have your beliefs. You're human. You can have that. But what I am after and what I will get is the truth. I want to know when the next attack is coming. I want to know why you did what you did or your beliefs. That's what I do want to know. So if I can get you to a point where I've established that rapport, I've gained your trust already, and you open up and start talking to me about those things, then we're good. But when it comes down to it, you can keep your beliefs because right now you're in prison and we're not going to allow you to hurt any more Americans or anybody for that matter, even fellow Muslims. So I think when you come to people oftentimes want to challenge a belief. Seems crazy. And they're like, well, why would you believe that? Don't you realize that you're killing innocent people? You can't win that battle. You cannot change people. So why bother? It's a waste of time and energy and effort. Focus on what you can influence, and that is getting information.
Well, you brought up a good point, and I believe it's Aldert Vrij.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that you have to treat terrorism separately, or questioning terrorists separately or differently than a criminal, because a criminal, you're trying to find out what they did. A terrorist, you're trying to find out what their intentions are or what they're about to do. How did you go about that different focus?
So actually, he's amazing. And I study a lot of his work. I read a lot of his work. I would disagree with that one statement, though, because I also train all of law enforcement, and I have interviewed / interrogated, whatever term you want to use, they're really the same, criminals and suspects. And the intent and objective is exactly the same. Number one, I want information from you. I want your motivations and intent. So when I train law enforcement, I'm trying to get them out of the mindset that they just want a confession. You don't want to do that. So in my 3-day class, the focus is to be more strategic in nature, to find out intent, motivations, and then the follow-on acts or people coming in to replace, other people. And when you really look at terrorists versus gang members, exactly the same. The camaraderie, the allegiance, exactly. There's no difference other than culture.
What's interesting, you said, what was it, interrogation, or you said another term that could be the same, but I talked to Greg Hartley about this too, I believe. I consider interrogation to be a form of negotiation.
Yeah, I could see that.
The only difference is you have a smaller window of things you're selling.
Yes, I think I sold tea and a change of cell and extra blankets and also the fact of just owning up to being a human being and taking responsibility for your actions at the end of the day. I like to tell people when I talk to them, like, listen, don't be a coward. If you did what you did, then own up to it.
Sure.
Right? If you don't have the fill in the blank, whatever word you want to use, if you don't have the courage to sit here and be responsible for your actions, that's what makes you look really bad. That's what you should be ashamed of. And I'll use that in approach technique as well.
What's interesting, and I thought it was an interesting direction you took with your book, that you started out with saying, here's how you lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was the intention of going with the flow of like, well, first let's discuss, was it to help understand what a lie actually was, so then you can talk about perceiving it? What was your intent for that?
I think I wanted the readers to first anchor to the feelings and emotions that they experience when they lie. Because if you're human, you lie. Every one of us does. And if you tell me you don't, you're lying, or you're not being honest with yourself. So I think I wanted to set off the book to say, listen, check in with yourself for a minute. And what do you experience when you lie? And what do you do when you lie? How do you change up your words? How do you lie by omission? And so by saying, hey, here's how you lie, people are like, oh, yeah, I do that. I did that. I never did that, but I might try it. So I just want them to reconnect with their human side and think, okay, I lie. I have lied, and I've felt like this in the past, and I've said this, and I've done that. And now I'm going to find out how it really comes across to other people, and what to look for when it's being done to me. And also my tells. I'll find out a little bit more about myself too.
Okay. And you describe liars as two types, imploders and exploders, I believe. And I would say that imploders you would probably rate as being the majority of society, and exploders are specialists. Do you want to go into that?
So I think you can use those terms interchangeably with regular and powerful liars too.
Powerful,
so,
yes.
An imploder / regular liar. It's just most of us, because when we lie, we don't like how we feel about lying. So when we lie, usually it will trigger our stress response system. And we have all the stuff going on in the body with the limbic system and our adrenaline and our cortisol and all that stuff. We have these physiological effects, and it just doesn't make us feel good. And then you have these powerful liars. And powerful liars don't mean that they're really good at lying, because I can still catch them. All it means is that they don't feel that stress and anxiety when they lie. Because a regular liar is usually worried about, can I keep up the lie? Can I make up the lie right now? Is the lie going to sound convincing? What are they going to question me on? How many details can I remember? And stress, right? And we go into cognitive overload. A powerful liar is like, whatever. I can wing it. I can schmooze. I'm a people person. People love to listen to me, because when I get through this lie, I get X. I get more money. I get the job I wanted. I hurt person Y. Whatever the outcome is, they're so focused on the reward of the lie that all the stress that comes along with lying isn't there. It's there, but it's not there as it is with a regular liar. And so that's really the difference. And when you get these powerful liars, like take our nation's spies, for example, they're all lying for some type of reward, right? Whether it's monetary, whether it's just affiliation to their culture, country, whatever it is, it's for a reward. And so that's why our famous nation's spies have passed polygraph every single year, because they're not getting that, the stress response system being activated, because they're not worried about it. But then you put a person like me or you, and we're like, oh God, we're lying. And we start to stress out and worry about it. And then we start pinging all these physiological responses to the stress on a polygraph machine. And so that's why it'll work there.
That actually leads into a perfect analogy. I had a former guest on, and I think I asked you to check it out. It was a challenge for an interview. He is very, very clear. I do like a challenging interview occasionally, but I do believe in what he's doing. I think that he brings up valid points, and that's why I ran the interview. His name is Doug Williams, and he is an anti-polygraph crusader. I can't think of a better way to put it, because he is that passionate. He's served time in prison for supposedly, teaching people how to beat the polygraph, which is ironic, because if you convict him, and he's right, if you convict him for teaching people to do it, you in essence are saying that it is in fact beatable and not a true tool. And he actually testified before Congress and helped make it illegal. That's why corporations cannot use the polygraph. But ironically, the government can.
Right.
Now, his issue, and I wanted to discuss with you, because you've been around both.
Yes.
People who are in a very stressful situation may well fail the polygraph and be completely, utterly innocent. Often they really are. I mean, if imagine you go in, you have an anthropology master's, I believe.
Yeah, I have a master's in archaeology and a bachelor's in anthropology.
Okay, now let's say it was, instead of that, it was nuclear science, and you were trying to work for a nuclear reactor, and you failed the polygraph. It's gone.
Yeah, gone.
Even though you were completely truthful, you failed the polygraph, your whole career, everything is wiped out. So that is kind of why he is fighting it.
Yeah. No, it's serious, because I have known people to have taken it and not so much fail it, but come out as inconclusive. And so I don't know if you know that I worked on a TV show for 3 years as an expert witness, and I had to interrogate litigants to see if they were lying.
Couples court.
Yes, couples court. And
I watched a couple.
Oh, okay, cool.
How was that?
It was a blast. I will tell you. Some of my litigants, absolutely crazy, but it was so much fun. And the thing is it's legitimate. It's real. So it wasn't canned as if we are like, okay, well, we're going to pretend you're going to lie about this, and we're going to put that. Now, obviously they want ratings, so they made it a little more sexy, a little more dramatic. But when they sat across from me, it was 100% legit. And I had to break them or discover the lies and get to the truth. And so usually when we would do that, they would have me as an expert witness. I was the only interrogator. And then they would have either an eye detect person or a voice stress analysis person or a polygrapher or a private investigator. forensics person. So we'd always have like a couple of experts for each case. And I often worked with a good friend of mine. He was a polygrapher, and he's amazing. I have such respect for him. And usually when I would get out of the interrogation, I would walk over to him. I said, listen, when you ask him on this question and this question, he's going to pop negative, but he's going to pop positive for these other three. That's what I think. And 9 times out of 10, we were right in sync. The machine validated what I saw and what I determined.
Well, and that it's an interesting thing because, and I don't know if you've heard of Chase Hughes. If not, I will definitely have to introduce him. He's local.
Yeah, Greg mentioned his name, but I don't know him.
Okay, well, he's actually in the area where we both live.
All right.
And as he put it, and I would agree with it, and Doug Williams actually too, is the polygraph is a tool.
Yes.
It's the examiner. And you can use that tool. Have you ever seen the show The Wire?
No.
Or the show Homicide? They're both done by David Simon. There was a funny part in it, though, where they had somebody come in. He was a drug dealing kid, and they had a copy machine. And so they asked him a question. They hit the button, and it spit out lie. What? How does... And the reason why I bring that up is some people could argue that that tool is equally as effective.
Yes. I will tell you what. I used a Game Boy in Gitmo.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Oh, break it down. Tell me. Okay. Tell me a story.
As soon as I had another interrogator come in, and we were doing the ruse that the Game Boy was a polygraph, and we had this little thing hooked up to his finger, like it was nothing. And we drew out a plot. It was a quad, and he had to point to yes and no and all these answers. And we used the Game Boy to determine whether or not he was lying or telling the truth. So at the very first question, we had the Game Boy light up and say it was a lie. And he just went, oh my gosh, he panicked so bad. He's like, take the thing off me. I'll tell you the truth. And all the truth came just from a Game Boy.
Okay, so that does substantiate it. It's a prop. And Chase Hughes is also saying that too, that it's not the time in the exam, it's right before and right after.
Yeah, people are so petrified of that exam exposing them that they usually just give up everything that they know. And it's a great tool to be used that way.
Well, and I guess that's Doug Williams' angle. He calls it a rubber hose.
Yeah. Now, I will also say this, though. I mean, I've worked with polygraphers, and again, that machine's results have been quite in sync with mine. I was in Dubai, and I was working with a private investigator and helping them on a big financial case. And so we were sitting in an intercontinental hotel, or I can't remember the hotel. Anyway, we're in a hotel conference room, and we're asking our person questions. And as we had 10 questions for him, and I was watching all the nonverbals and listening to his verbal responses. And on 2 questions, I'm like, they're lies, right? He popped deceptive on me for 2 questions. Well, wouldn't you know, the machine said exactly the same results. Pop deceptive on 2 questions. So his anxiety increased on those 2 questions.
So it picks up stress, not necessarily lies. It picks up stress.
And that's the thing. A polygraph machine, and any polygrapher will tell you this. My friend that worked in couples court, they will all tell you this. It is not a lie detecting machine. It is not. It's never been, and it has never been. It cannot be called that. All it does is detect physiological responses to stress, sweating, your blood pressure, your heart rate, that sort of stuff. That is it. And if you don't stress, the machine has nothing to read. And if you do, it'll show spikes. And if you're under drugs or the influence of alcohol or anything else, it's not going to work.
Yes. And actually a little Valium is often used to help.
Yeah. And even polygrapher, if they have a certain way in how they have to introduce the information and ask the questions, if that method is not exact, the results will not be accurate either.
That's true. And Doug Williams, by the way, same guy, what he would teach, he got out of a birthing book.
No, the breathing method.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've taken mindfulness training, and I actually train in mindfulness techniques. And there's a thing called the calming breath, the 4-7-8. You breathe in for a count of 4, you hold it for a count of 7, and you blow out through your mouth very slowly for a count of 8. Instantly calms you right down. Instantly. I can be on a blood pressure cuff because I have high blood pressure. I don't know why. But I can be on a blood pressure cuff and immediately drop my in my blood pressure just by doing that breathing.
That's weird. Ironically, I used to have to donate plasma when I was younger and irresponsible to get money, but you had to have enough blood pressure. I've always had really low. So I had the opposite effect. I would always flinch my stomach, clenching it to get my blood pressure jacked up enough to where I could donate.
Wow. I didn't know that. I'd be a perfect candidate then.
Yeah, there you go. You'd be like, oh, here's some extra. Come on down.
Yeah.
Speaking of truthfulness or not, or otherwise, I asked you to check out a couple videos. Previous guest that I had on, John Mcafee.
Yeah.
And I would love to start with his. It's a very short segment, so I completely understand that it's easy to take out of context, whatever. You don't have a lot of general thing. But what was your impression of the segment?
So in that video, I didn't need any more because I'm a word girl and I put a lot of emphasis on people's words and how they use them. Usually when people lie, they're always thinking about body language and trying to control body language. People forget to focus on the words. Your words will always give your lie up. Always, because people can't think of controlling them, number one, and it's almost impossible, number two. I mean, we can control on what we want to say, but the indicators of deception leak right out. So here's a great example in this video.
Did you kill Greg Fall? I barely knew the man, and why would I kill him? He was a neighbor that lived 200 yards down the beach.
He was asked by the interviewer, did you kill Greg, and I forgot his last name, Fall? And instead of saying, so that's a yes or no question, right? Did you kill someone? Yes or no question. A truthful person just gives you the answer. Liars typically want to convince you, right? Truth tellers convey, liars convince. A truth teller will usually answer a yes or no question with a yes or a no and be done with it. But a liar says, I need more than that. They're not going to buy my yes or no, so I'll have to convince them and oversell. Or I'm not going to commit to a yes or no at all. In fact, I'm going to do a smoke screen or I'll add some fluff in. So his response was this. Did you kill Greg? He says, I barely knew the man. And why would I kill him? He was a neighbor that lived 200 yards down the beach. There were 5 indicators of deception in that one sentence. Number one, I teach this. It's like my second most common verbal indicator of deception. Refusal to answer yes and no. Right. You see it in Anthony Weiner. You've seen it in Bill Clinton. They just won't say, yes, I sent the tweet, or no, I didn't. You see in Hillary Clinton, no, I didn't wipe the servers clean. She cannot say at one time that she didn't wipe the servers clean. Anthony Weiner never could say, I didn't send the tweet. It's so simple, right? Just say no. But for some reason, we can't because it doesn't make us feel good. So he avoids that. Number two, he calls him the man. Now, when you get into pronouns, a man indicates, I have no idea who this guy is. It's unfamiliar. But the man indicates, I know this man, right? And of course, we know that he does. But in this case, it's distancing language. Because what he could have said and should have said was, I barely knew Greg. But he did. He said, the man, right? Like when Bill Clinton said, I didn't have sex with that woman. Right? We know you know her name, Bill. This guy, John, we know you know his name. Why aren't you saying it?
Greg Fall, by the way.
That's it. Greg Fall. Yes. And it's when we don't say that name, we want nothing to do with it. We want to distance ourselves from the lie, from this negative thing. So that's hit number 2. He says the man. Hit number 3. And then he asks our question, right? It's a stalling technique. Well, why would I kill him? Right? Well, that's what I just asked you. So you repeated the question back to me. So it's a stalling technique. Number 4, he adds fluff, right? Well, he was a neighbor that lived blah, blah, blah. I didn't ask you that, John. And we all know that he was your neighbor, which is why we're having this interview. So there's no reason for you to add that fluff in right now and just keep talking about nothing instead of answering the question, right? So it's a diversion tactic. And I will train law enforcement about the fluff. I call it fluff, unnecessary information. And then finally, he talks about a neighbor. He was a neighbor that lived 200 downs. Again, a neighbor, not my neighbor, right? When we have a lack of I and my, which are possessive pronouns, it means we're, again, distancing ourselves from the thing or the event that we don't like. So 5 indicators of deception. I don't believe them.
Now, there's more to the story, too, which I think just really, really makes him look guilty. And as an animal lover, you would appreciate it too.
Oh,
The
yeah,
neighbor poisoned his dogs.
I know.
Do you think you would not know who that neighbor is if you suspected that they were poisoning your dogs?
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
would be so, in my personal mind, he would be so focused. Oh, I would know every intimate detail.
Yes, you would. Yes, you would. I know I would. And let me tell you, if anyone can have my animals, watch out.
I still won't buy Nike.
Yeah. Oh, why?
Because they immediately sponsored Michael Vick, and I have problems with that.
Oh, well, I don't touch Nike. I'm an A6 girl, but yeah, I do nothing Nike. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think it's disgusting. And that's a whole nother topic. If you want to get into it, we totally can. I'm an animal savior.
But
Volunteering for the last 15 years of my life at organizations and in animal care. And yeah, it's a huge topic with me.
and I know that when I was researching you, so I was like, yeah, that would probably trigger.
Yeah.
It actually made me feel less strongly about it, believe it or not.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it.
And that's terrible to say, obviously, but it did. Now, you did mention something about distancing language, and I was, I've been reading the book, and there are times, and I think you do admit that you have to kind of really baseline and look at exceptions all the time, because I can't help but think about a few of the terms, like in an argument with the wife, somebody tell that woman blah, 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 especially in the middle of a divorce, whatever. I think that is a natural thing. Sometimes it's not necessarily a deceitful thing, but literally I have shut her. She is dead to me, blah, 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 or whatever.
Agree. Totally agree. 100%. Which is why when we get into the second video, you're going to hear a lot of, I had to go watch that thing 3 times.
That was trickier.
Yeah. There's indications of truthfulness and there's indications of lying. There's both in that video. But I think I've uncovered what I think the lie is about.
Okay. Well, and so that was a nice pair for you then.
Well, thank you.
Fun stuff to look at.
Yeah.
But while I had you, I had another one. You had talked about changing tenses in telling stories.
Yep.
Sometimes, and I don't know if it's just a natural raconteur, but there are people who will switch to present tense to make the story more impactful. Like, I went to the mall and I hit this, I ran across this guard, and this guard comes up to me, and now here I am. I'm blah, blah, blah. And they break it down into a narrative. That wouldn't necessarily be deception. Maybe it's a slight embellishment or exaggeration, but would you call it a deception necessarily?
No. And so here's the thing with that. I usually look for verb tense changes in written statements, right? It's a little more accurate because at that point you're really thinking about your thoughts and the words that you're putting down at paper. But when people speak, sometimes that thought process doesn't really happen. And so it's just coming out. But when we tend to write, we take a little more time to think. And so it's more deliberate, I would say. But I always tell people, listen, you cannot use just that one indicator. It's got to be followed up with a whole bunch of other things. When I teach my law enforcement classes, I go through a verbal indicator of deception called the text bridge. And a text bridge is a chunk of words that jump over a period of time and a period of information. Right. It doesn't mean it's a lie. It just means that there's more information within that chunk of time. It may be important. It may not be. It may be a lie. It may not be. You, as the interviewer, have to go find that out and dig for that. So when I tell the story of my own personal text bridge, which was not a lie and was drowned when I was young, my story goes from past to present, past to present, past to present. And it's truthful. I'm not lying. So why do we do that? Is it because I don't have the answer? And I don't know if there's anybody out there that does, but it could be because we're recalling this event. And of course, this event happened when I was 13 years old. That's a long time ago. I'm picturing it in my mind. I'm picturing the beach. I'm doing this visual. I have to piece together all the memory bits in my long-term memory, pull them forward. And, since it happened so long ago, most of it's gone. And so when I create the story, I'm working for just a few known bits of information. as I have to tell it in a story format, I got to fill it in with kind of made up information.
Right.
And so that present tense comes in. So the known bits, which would make no sense if I just said one after the other, past tense. But when I start to weave it into the story, I end up going past the present. So that one can be very tricky, very tricky.
It can also be tricky too, right? Because, okay, one, you said, I can tell you one thing it can be, hypnosis. Now, I know that sounds weird, but the truth is that we go into a theta state all the time. How did I get to work? What did I see? I don't remember. I just drove. Other things I think are filters, like, especially if something's very, very impactful on the other side of it, I might forget that I got gas on the way home that day. Because who cares? It's just something that I did. And, you know, I might go to eat the same restaurant every day because I like fast food. And I go to McDonald's every day. That day I went to McDonald's, got gas and went home. I might completely bypass it. So I guess my question would be, isn't it true that a truthful person often will come out with more and more information sometimes over time, and somebody being deceitful might be so on their story that it never deviates in any way, shape, or form?
Totally. I tell people this, listen, details are going to be the death of the lie in one of two ways. Number one, they're not going to be there because it's too much effort to make them up and remember. Or number two, they're going to be there because the lie is trying to convince you. Oh, wow, that's a truth teller too. This is why detecting deception is so hard. When I teach it, I teach people, not only are you looking for the indicators of deception, you have got to be looking for the indicators of truthfulness too. If you're not looking for the truth, you're never going to be able to determine whether or not that person is lying or what they're lying about. So in that second video, I had to look, for both, and there are indicators of both. And then you weigh how many are indicators of truthfulness versus deceptive. But then the real, I guess the real critical moment comes when you are the interviewer, is to getting the truth. Because even though I'm really good at detecting lies, I don't know. I don't know until that person has said, Lena, I lied to you. Here's the truth. Right? How am I going to know?
What's so funny, and I am going to get into the second video. You see, this is called a tease. Everybody needs to watch to the end. And by the way, subscribe. Now, congruency is kind of what you're teaching, and you can sense these things. Sorry, I'm trying to word it well. What I feel is we've already know all of this stuff. This is actually built into us biologically, but we have completely taken it out of our systems because we read papers, watch TV, we depend on the internet and computers to tell us what to think or feel. But these things, like Gavin DePecker talks about, the gift of fear, things like that, instinctively, we actually have all the tools.
We do.
And I think you've stated that before too, that if somebody bothers you or something about them bothers you, you're probably right.
Yeah, it's just when you go to a body language class, now you have terminology to put to it. I always tell people, go with your gut feeling, because what you're doing is intuitively, you're already picking up on the indicators. You just don't know what to call them.
Okay, so exactly. And now let's lead into video number 2. And this one was trickier too, because I think there's cultural differences. There's also, I would fear, especially because I fed you the videos in this order too, so I could plant a confirmation bias. Yes. I give you somebody who seems so completely guilty and then say, oh, and here's the guy he had do it. So and that's another segue. Do you have to watch out for your own confirmation bias that they're a liar coming in your mind?
All the time. I tell people, stop the internal chatter. If you have a little voice inside you going, they're going to be guilty, I know they're guilty, well, this detainee's in Gitmo for a reason, it must be because they did something bad, you're done. You're done, because now you're basing all of your analysis on an expectation or an assumption. And it's going to be skewed. It's going to be very subjective.
So I set you up that way. And you managed to fight it off. And tell me about the video.
What information? What you want to know?
Well,
you were the one, you will be the one asking the question.
Okay, all right. Where were you when Greg Fall was killed?
Orange Wall.
So can you tell me the real story?
About
So around that time, did John ask you to do something and give you any money, like $5,000?
Around that time?
Mm-hmm.
No.
No?
No, never. Didn't have any incident or anything going down. Nothing like that at that point.
All right, let's get into this video. So I'm going to walk through it a little kind of segment by segment. And I wrote notes, which I'm referencing.
Awesome.
Overall, this guy has closed body language. Okay, so he's very tight and very close. It just tells me he's covering up. He feels uncomfortable. He has clenched hands. We clench our hands. It's almost as though we don't want our body to do anything we didn't expect it to do, right? So we're controlling ourselves. And usually those two things will tip me off. Why do you feel the need to control yourself? Right? Because truthful people don't care what their hands do or their body does and just let it go. But people who have something to hide usually clench up, right?
Also, people being filmed.
Yeah, you just took the words out of my mouth. I was just going to say, as well as people who are just darn nervous because of being filmed on camera. Oh my gosh. Wow. This has got like a mind reading thing going on, right? So is he nervous because he's lying, or is he nervous because he's being filmed for this and being asked if he got paid $5,000 to kill someone? I would be really nervous, right? So that aside, he stupors delight and contempt throughout the whole thing. But is that his baseline? I don't know this guy from Adam, and this is the only video I've seen. And all throughout it, he does a little smile. Paul Ekman dubbed it Duper's delight, and then he leaves contempt. This, right? The little one, half smile. Usually, I will say with good amount of accuracy, when a liar lies to me, right after they lie, I got away with it. Like it's almost, it's so high up there for the accuracy. So he does that. And then he has a convincing technique going on. So remember that yes and no question I talked about? A truthful person doesn't feel they have to oversell it. They answer yes, they answer no, done with it. Sometimes they may add a little bit. But a person who says no, or never for no, or always for yes, it's almost as though they're trying convincing us. And liars tend to convince us.
Why are you smiling?
Because it's weird. So you're trying to tell me that you paid me if I told him that? So no, man, that's crazy.
No?
No.
So you didn't get $5,000 wired into your account?
No, never.
So some people said they saw you that night, and you went to John's house.
No. No, never.
Never?
Never.
This guy answered almost every yes or no question. No, never. No, never. But is that his baseline? Right? So I don't know, because I don't know this guy. When I don't know the baseline, I have to take those indicators and throw them in the trash because they don't mean anything to me. So I got to look for something else. What I did notice was this. Kept wiping his forehead. Now that's an indicator of stress, right? Because he's sweating. So that was like, finally. That
kind of a giggle, too, he had.
Oh, good. Well, we'll get into that. Yes, because I can't tell you how many liars I've had that just bust up laughing. And I'm like, why are you laughing? What is so funny? I'm not laughing, and it's because of I don't know what it is, the stress of lying, or they're just trying to, that little smirk, like
this is going to be terrible. And I know it's rude, but everybody in the universe, I think, is guilty of farting and not having people know it. And it might be a horrible analogy, but it is kind of like that whole crazy farting secret.
That's funny. Yeah, I love that analogy. I love it. So let's start off. So the interviewer, she says, so around that time, did John ask you to do something and give you any money, like $5,000? He says, no. Or he doesn't say no. He doesn't answer yes and no. Remember, I'm looking for that immediate yes and no. That indicates truthfulness. Instead, he clarifies what she says. Around that time, and I was like, ping, now we have some meat to work with, right? Instead of focusing on answering the question and being paid money to kill someone, he's focused on what? That time, around that time. So that tells you where his brain is right now and where he's concerned. Then the interviewer goes, and he leaks the contempt and the dupers, the little laughing, and he says, no, never. But here's my issue. He was congruent, right? So behavioral congruency is one of the most, I think, accurate ways to detect deception. If you're incongruent, probably deceptive. If you're congruent, probably truthful. So he says no, and no, never. Shakes his head no. That's pretty legit. And then he follows up and he says, no, never, congruent, no incident going down, not at that time. So now twice I have him clarifying that time. That leads me to believe that something else happened, another incident. But what was it? Right? So that's what right now. I can't tell you if he's lying or being truthful in that response, but I can tell you there's something else he's thinking about at another time. And I would have to ask him. So then she goes on and he starts laughing and she catches him and she says something like, why are you laughing? And he goes, oh, no, ma'am. Well, that's just crazy. And as soon as he says that's crazy, he nods yes. So why is he making that? Some people, when we talk about incongruent head nods and shakes, and if I said, absolutely, yes, yes, yes. And my head shaking no. People are like, haha, you're lying. Most of the time, but there are some times if people say no and they do one quick nod, I actually do it in my TED Talk, where it's that nod has nothing to do with yes and no. That
It's
nod
a punctuator.
Bingo.
No.
Bingo.
No idea. It's same as if you were going to sling a finger at somebody.
Like, yes. Now, sometimes liars do it to convince, but I will tell you, a lot of truthful people do it. I do it all the time. So you have to be careful. So the reason when he says, well, no, ma'am, that's crazy, and he punctuates that, right? Is he punctuating like legitimately? That's crazy. It didn't happen. So she goes on. So you didn't get 5,000 wired into your account. Again, he goes, no, never. He's congruent again, right? And he's still saying never. And he's still doing the contempt and duper's delight. So he's still laughing. We still have him flashing contempt. And then we have him doing the never, right? But I still think the no never is his language baseline.
Right.
When we come down to when she says people saw him that night, that's where he's going to get busted. Because at that point, he bites his lip.
Okay.
Impossible. Maybe my twin. I don't have a twin anyway.
So you were not hired by John to kill Greg Fall?
No, never.
And if you were, would you tell me?
No. Well, I'm not crazy to tell someone I killed someone. That's ridiculous, But I was never paid by John to kill anyone.
So I was trying to understand why someone would say this.
I want to know right now, too. Who gave you that information?
I cannot tell you.
Okay.
Did you have an alibi?
I don't need an alibi. I was home. We were having a wedding at that time. So our family member was there. My sister was marrying.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which is self-control. And you went to John's house, she says. He says, no, never again. But this time he swipes away. He can't look her in the eye as he does this. And he does this. All before about with the $5,000, he never does this, never waves his head.
Right.
And she starts talking about being at John's house that night. I get new indicators and I get swiping the head. Then he adds fluff. Well, maybe it's my twin. So we call that the smoke screen. To me, that's a huge indicator of he's trying to hide something, right? So there's something about him being at his house that night that I think he's being deceptive about. I don't know about this $5,000.
I'm wondering, though, and you probably didn't see the whole documentary, but the person who said that he paid him the $5,000, I'm like, well, did you skim $1,000 off the top and pay him $4,000? Then he would be absolutely truthful. No, absolutely not.
Bingo. Or did he pay him $5,000, but for something else or at another time? Remember that first question? Twice he was clarifying. At that time? No, not at that time. So did he get paid the $5,000 at another time for something else?
And John Mcafee admits having every drug known to man.
Right? Exactly. So what was he paid with? What happened? Not sure. I'm not a mind reader. And then finally, you were not hired by John Chilger. She says something to interview. I couldn't make out the name. So she says, you're not hired by John? He said, no, never again. He was congruent. I was never paid by John to kill anyone. That's a pretty definitive, truthful sentence. But here's my problem. the new indicators come out with the fact about that night that he was at John's house, right? He clearly, the anxiety increases. You can see it. You can see new indicators. So there was something around that. The other thing is when he kept clarifying at that time with the money. So that's another part. So we have two things where I think he's being deceptive and there's more information. But other than that, I don't know this guy. I've never seen another video with him. I've never had just a normal conversation, a relaxed conversation. I can't baseline him. So I don't know if the no never is something he always says. I don't know if the duper polite in the contempt is because that's what he normally does, or if he's just super, super nervous. But I do think he's being deceptive in those two areas.
Well, perfect. And I want to wrap up on that one and ask you, I've asked other guests too, I do a live stream where I give an opportunity for my audience and my guest audience to have people ask questions in the chat during the live stream. And I was wondering if you would be interested in doing that, because we've got a nice start here and it'll be fun to follow up on this with people writing in their own questions.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I'm being congruent.
Perfect.
I said absolutely not yes, right? It's a lot going on to the science.
You know, it's funny though, you mentioned that, and God, I can think of exceptions to everything, like people who equivocate all the time. You went to Brown. I guarantee there's some of your professors that would drive you crazy because they would always equivocate or say actually, or would never give you a straightforward answer. So
yeah,
almost any tell you're talking about can actually be, actually. Terrible. And I can tell you this from interviewing because I will edit, and it can be frustrating when I edit somebody who stops at every sentence. They start a phrase, pivot, and then say the rest. Start a phrase, pivot, and say the rest. And what it is it's like reading an academic paper. Every time you read them, it is such a meandering flow of garbage. It is frustrating.
Yeah. It can be. Oh my gosh, it can be. Yeah.
But you are not a meandering flow, and
to the point.
Can find out more about you at the congruencygroup.com.
Yes. Yep.
And your book is called shortly You're Lying.
Yes. And I just got picked up to publish my third book from HarperCollins on interviewing, and it's more of a leadership role, but it's interviewing for any type of investigative information gathering. It could be for hiring, for recruiting, for anything. So a lot of interpersonal communication skills.
Love that, and look forward to that. So until next time.
All right. Sounds great.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks.